Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Post. Our guest for today's episode is a global social media manager at Bazaarvoice, and coming from a B2C background, she brings a unique perspective and engaging content to her company's B2B social profiles. She's passionate about creating social-first content and authentic moments on social, and she's even made the news recently for doing just that, which we'll dive into during this episode. So join me in welcoming our guest, Kaylin Valderrama. Kaylin, are you ready to go behind the post with me?
Let's do it.
Amazing. I'm so excited to have you here to talk about social first content, which I know you're so passionate about. But before we jump into it, please can you let our audience know what is Bazaarvoice and what does your role entail?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bazaarvoice helps thousands of brands and retailers impact sales, brand awareness, site traffic, and so much more by collecting user-generated content like ratings and reviews, questions and answers, social and visual content. So we're really connecting the voice of the consumer online with the voice of the brand to help drive sales. So I'm the global social media manager here at Bazaarvoice. So I help create compelling content, develop and execute a social strategy, and manage all of our social accounts to elevate the brand and support our business objectives.
Amazing. So I'm interested to ask because you've come from a background working in social media for B2C companies. So I'm wondering when you transitioned to B2B marketing, how did you shape your strategy? Like take us back to the drawing board. Where did you start?
Yeah. So before I came over to Bazaarvoice, I was primarily in the B2C space and social. And I also was helping to manage social for an influencer who has an HGTV show. So I kind of was in all these different buckets before I came to Bazaarvoice. And when it comes to B2B social media marketing and B2C social media marketing, the core principles and the strategies, they often overlap and really aren't that different. So, whether it's B2B or B2C, you are marketing to people. So, whenever I started at Bazaarvoice, I really wanted to shape the new social strategy around that. And I really had to reshape how people viewed social because I think that at Bazaarvoice, they view social very much how many B2B companies view it, which is it's kind of an afterthought. It was like very B2B focused of pie charts, webinars, ebooks, the things that you traditionally see on social from a B2B company. Um, and I wanted to reshape that overall strategy and really think about how can we develop a relationship with the people that are behind these companies that we're trying to connect with. So I thought about a target audience of people that might have an interest in our products. They want to check in on what we're doing on a social strategy perspective, instead of focusing just on decision makers, which I think is really important. Because that's the whole point of social is developing a relationship, regardless of if you're in B2B or B2C. So whenever I first started at Bazaarvoice, one thing that I really did was do a lot of research on what B2B companies have done in the past on social to learn from that from a pro and con perspective of, okay, what are they doing well and what can we learn from these other companies and do better? And I started listening to this podcast and it had this one analogy that I absolutely loved that really helped me to shape the B2B strategy and pull it from my B2C perspective, from my past experience. And this woman was saying, she was like, imagine that you move to a new city and you get invited to a house party. And you walk in, the person who's throwing the house party introduces themselves, and immediately they're like, hey, have you seen my pool? Let's go look at my pool. Let's go check out the materials that I used to build my pool. You should really buy a pool. You should really do all these things, blah, blah, blah. And she was talking about how we need to reshape how we see B2B and make it more of a relationship and more personable and change it to where you go to a house party, you walk in, and the person says to you, hey, what's your name? I heard that you just moved here. What do you like to do? Oh, I like to swim. Oh, that's amazing. Let's go check out my pool and just make it more organic. And I thought that this was such a cool way to reshape how B2B views social. Because even though we are selling something and that's a big part of our business objective, you want it to feel organic and like a relationship because if you went to a house party and somebody approached you, like the first person that I explained, you would be like, okay, this person's weird and this feels very inauthentic and I'm out of here. But with the second one, with it being more of a conversation, that really helped to kind of reshape our social strategy at Bazaarvoice and think of it more of a relationship and developing that with our followers and with people on social. Because I think that a big thing to remember is without a relationship to your social audience, the traffic will just come and go. So, with all of that in mind, I used my experience of working in B2C, and I really focused on building a new B2B social strategy at Bazaarvoice that focused on social first content and fostering that relationship. Um, I think that one thing that's important to remember is whether you're B2B or B2C, you cannot lose out on a deal because your social strategy is not good or you're not prioritizing social. And so at the end of the day, people, they don't want to buy a product or a software, whatever it is. They want to buy success and they want to buy from a company that is showing that on social. So I think bringing all of that in from my experience with B2C and then bringing that into B2B and thinking about it from a relationship perspective really made it to where it wasn't that different and it helped to reshape what Bazaarvoice is today.
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting. I love the swimming pool analogy. It's almost like you don't want to suddenly do an elevator pitch on social. It's not how it works. Like you want to show up, you want to show that you're an expert in the space. Your content's entertaining. You want your audience to come back to you because they like seeing your content, and bringing in
Right.
that B2C perspective that you have is so important because I always say this at the end of the day, it's a human behind B2B that's buying still,
Right.
even if it's not
Exactly.
under B2C. Yeah. So it's so interesting to hear you say that. So now I'm wondering, what is first social first content then? If that's the where you want to get to, how do you make this?
Yeah. So social first content is social content that is not an afterthought, is the best way that I like to describe it. So you're not taking content that is not suited for social and forcing it in there. You're creating content that is built for your platforms and for your audience. So for me, this was a huge part of developing the social strategy at Bazaarvoice because social first content is rooted in authenticity, and authenticity is everything that we do as a business here at Bazaarvoice. So knowing each platform, knowing the slight differences of each persona or audience that is on each platform, and then creating content for those audiences and for those platforms is creating social first content. So a fun example that we talked about a little bit earlier that has been in the works recently at Bazaarvoice was
We
about
want to
two
hear
weeks
the
ago.
story.
Yes. About 2 weeks ago, I got a text from someone who I thought was our CEO, and I quickly realized it was one of those scam people that was asking me to buy them gift cards. And which I feel like everyone in the tech space knows this scam because like it happens all the time. So I basically decided to kind of mess with this person. And I also was just curious if they would reply and like what this, if it was like an AI bot or what it was. And I said, "Hey, Keith, our CEO, yes, I can go buy these gift cards for you, but can I have a raise in a promotion? And can I go to Paris next month and film TikToks for our social account?" And he was like, "Oh, I'll have to check on everything else, but I can guarantee the raise." And I was like, "Oh, heck yeah." And so I thought this was such a funny moment. And I decided, I was like, wait, this could be a really cool social first moment, even though this isn't in my strategy. This is like something that literally just happened. But I was like, this is such a funny, cool, authentic moment. And it was something that was a scam that quickly turned into exactly what Bazaarvoice does, which is that we're the leaders of authenticity and we practice what we preach with authentic content. So we know the power of the creator culture. We know the social landscape currently, and we like to have fun. And so why don't we show that with this funny video of us, the social media manager, asking the CEO for a raise and to go to Paris. And so I posted it on our TikTok. It went viral overnight with over 120,000 views. And the local news picked it up. It became this whole joke inside at Bazaarvoice, which was hilarious. And I actually get to go to Cannes Lions now with the team, which is just like the craziest turn of events ever. But I think that that is such a perfect use case for what social first is, which is as a social media manager thinking, how can I turn any moment into a social moment? And I knew that that was relatable. I knew it was authentic. I knew in this really roundabout way, it showed what Bazaarvoice does, which is that we, like I said, we understand authentic content and the power of authentic content. And so it was just so cool. And then it turned into this really amazing moment that is going to create more social first moments when I go to Cannes. So I'm
Oh,
really excited.
yeah. Who's laughing now? You get to go to Cannes. Really
I
fun.
literally the scammer and be like, "Thank you. Thank you for."
Yeah, did you a favor. It's so interesting to hear that one because the story is crazy. I remember seeing it all over my feed, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's in the news. But also because it really is true, creating this content that people can resonate still works for B2B brands. So whether it's also if someone is scamming is not texting anybody listening, you can also do it with polls and videos, and there's so many other ways to like show up, show your face, jump on trends. Like if it's applicable to your industry and it works, jump on them because people are engaging with that as well and people find it interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, so and they can interact with it a lot more than a static post, which obviously they're also really beneficial and they also help, but you can also bring the B2C energy into B2B.
Exactly.
Yeah. So other than going to Cannes, what results have you seen from this social first content and being authentic? And how do you know if it's working?
Yeah. So the content that we've seen perform best normally involves some kind of employee advocacy, some kind of trending content. So, like a meme, a sound that's currently trending, and then social first content. And I think if you can hit all three of those, you've kind of hit the jackpot on a perfect piece of content. So, in terms of analytics, whenever I was first brought on at Bazaarvoice, our strategy was really solely focused on follower growth and brand awareness on LinkedIn. And so whenever I started, we had so in the last 365 days, I pulled these analytics yesterday on Octopost. In the last 365 days, we have gained a little over 18,000 followers. And I started in December, and since December, we have gained 16,000 of those followers.
Wow.
So it has been a huge uplift in our followers, building those relationships. And I think that is so telling of building relationships being a big part of our social strategy, and it working. People wanting to follow us, people wanting to build that relationship with Bazaarvoice on social. So that has been really, really cool to see that follower growth and to be able to hit those goals. And then in terms of reach, we've seen, and this number is going to sound crazy, but I promise I did the math like 5 times yesterday, but we've seen about a 9,000% increase in our reach since this time last year. And I think that that also just has to do with focusing on social first content, and not just shoving stuff in there that we're wanting to promote, making it really, people want to find our content on social now, which I think is really, really important.
Definitely, especially in the B2B space, because obviously LinkedIn's the primary channel right now. So, and will be for a long time. So it's interesting to see that you can still bring that content to social media and it's working, and to LinkedIn, sorry, and it works. And it just shows the value that it has because the growth of say 16,000 since December. That's
Hmm.
incredible growth. And like your reach, you said 9,000. Okay,
Yes,
I
9,000%.
say these numbers because they're so big, it's incredible. So it's just goes to show how valuable it is and how much it does work. So wondering though, why did you choose to measure those analytics?
Yeah. So whenever we created the social plan, whenever I first was brought on, the first thing I did was I met with key members of different cross-functional teams at Bazaarvoice, and identified their business goals. And then out of those, I picked 4 to 5 business goals that I thought were really aligned across the business at Bazaarvoice, and I assigned social goals to those business goals. And then we set KPIs for those social goals. And that's how we determined what we were going to focus on moving forward. So I think one thing that has also really helped with picking what analytics to focus on has been looking at audiences and figuring out what audiences are we trying to reach on what channels and what is really our priority. And then creating content around those specific audiences and really honing in on not just shooting in the dark, I think has really helped with our analytics and with seeing results. Um, so it basically was aligning business goals with social goals was how we picked those.
It's interesting to hear that, especially the you don't want to shoot in the dark. I love that phrase because it's so important to look, see what's working, see what's not working. And these metrics can actually help you get to your KPIs and goals before it gets to like the end of the quarter or the first 6 months or the year. And you're like, oh, we didn't get as far as we wanted to. I didn't hit my KPIs, but the metrics could have been telling you that a long time ago and you could have shifted and changed. So I think that's also a really important thing to highlight. And I know that you're primarily focused on LinkedIn with conversations with you before. And for B2B marketing, that makes a lot of sense. But what's also interesting is you mentioned TikTok and other channels, but it's working out how we can leverage platforms seen traditionally as B2C like TikTok. So do you have a TikTok strategy currently, and what does it look like?
Yes, we do. So I think the thing with TikTok is it can be hard to sell to people within your organization who are really focused on numbers and wanting to generate leads, because in the B2B space, TikTok is just not going to do that. TikTok is super top of funnel, even pre funnel. So the way that I described it to our team whenever I was advocating for using TikTok was, it's okay that our TikTok channel is pre funnel. A lot of people are going to be viewing our content on TikTok and they're just scrolling on their For You page. They're consuming the content quickly and they're probably not going to revisit. They're probably not going to come back to your page to watch your videos. It's just a quick scroll and it's all about brand awareness. So I think, especially with TikTok and the content that you're making on TikTok, you have to sell it as, look, this is silly goofy. This is super social first. And I think that the way that I sold it to our team internally of including it in our social strategy was, look, we want to drive a good social program. We want to be seen as experts in the social space because that's the industry that we're in. And we want people to say, you know, look, Bazaarvoice has such funny TikToks and they have such a good social program, because creating content that is social first and creating that social program is really what drives commerce. And that's what we ultimately sell to our customers. So I think that one way to look at it is, one of our target audiences is social media managers. And so if people are coming to our TikTok page because they're social media managers and they want to copy the TikToks that we're making, or they see that we're hopping on trends, they see that we're in the know, that right there is targeting our audience without even really trying.
Yeah.
So I think that that's been the way that I've sold the social strategy and how I've really helped to reshape how we view TikTok from a B2B space, because it can definitely be a really hard sell. But I think just being honest with your team and being like, hey, look, TikTok is not about conversions. You know, we are not going to get these big decision makers that we potentially are reaching on LinkedIn on TikTok. These people are going to be pre-funnel. They might have absolutely zero interest in Bazaarvoice and our solutions, but they think that our content is good and they're consuming our content and they're coming in, they're checking in on us, and it's all about brand awareness. And I think that that will really help you as a B2B social media manager to reshape how people see TikTok, and still know that it's important. And it's an important part of a successful social strategy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to say, because there is a lot of pushback because you don't get conversions. People don't necessarily click a link on a TikTok and land on your website. There's no like website traffic coming from that. But the brand awareness and the fact that people engage with the content, find your content funny, find it entertaining, helps later down the line in building your brand. And then maybe one day someone who is more related to who you're supposed to target sees your content because you have a bigger brand awareness. But it's more about seeing the value and what you can do in this even pre-funnel platform where you can really get people engaged and get an audience engaged. So I think it's really important to include these other B2C type platforms as
Mhm.
well as just LinkedIn. So I want to wrap up with the last question and ask you, you've obviously had a great career in social from B2C, B2B, across different industries. So along the way, what is the best piece of social media advice you've ever been given?
So, one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever gotten from another social media manager was, she said, you're not a successful social media manager until someone at your company has sent you a Slack saying, hey, can you take that down? And I absolutely loved that piece of advice, because I think that you need to be bold in the social space, whether you're in B2C or B2B. It is so saturated and you need to be bold. You need to do things that are pushing the line a little bit. And I think that that is what is going to lead to ultimately your organization being known and being seen as a leader in the social space. And I have totally gotten many of those slacks throughout my career. And that content is normally the content that is performing well, or it's the ones that people talk about. And I think that I just love that idea of, you know, push the limits a little bit and be bold and be different.
Yeah, I love that. It's also so nice to hear someone turn something that's like everyone panics when they get a message like, "Did you see the spelling mistake? Can you take that down?" Everyone gets nervous when they hear that, but it's so nice to hear you turn that into a complete positive. And it is true, being bold is what's going to make you stand out on socials. So I love that advice. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me this episode. I've loved being able to hear personally the story that ended up with you going to Cannes because of a scammer. And I'm sure our audience also loved it as well. And thank you so much for talking to us about social first content because it's so important even in the B2B space. So it's good to hear some of your knowledge about it. So thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, thank you.